Throughout history, people got to places walking. Crazy concept, I know, but have you ever thought about just how weird the way we walk now is? Specifically where we walk, like the physical space that we use to walk now. This little sliver of cement is what the modern person is relegated to as the pedestrian road, and no one uses them. Now, people since forever have always used central pathways to travel, whether you call them streets, roads, trails, dirt roads, etc. And almost always they were naturally made, meaning people made roads out of the pathways that were formed by repeated use. And you can see this in ancient cities. The streets are extremely narrow by our standards, and it had this pattern of webbing out from a central point. Compare this to modern cities and the differences are clear. Primarily one big change that has shifted city planning forever: the modern road. Since the advent of the automobile, streets took on a different meaning. What was once just a paved public space that was used by people, horses, carriages, everyone and everything suddenly became a space just for these metal machines on wheels. And the pedestrian? Well, they just became an afterthought, literally pushing them and the walkway to the side, giving them a sidewalk. However, this was a band-aid to a wound that didn't ever fix the problem, and its century-old design has never changed. You see, sidewalks aren't used, not because everything is far now or people just prefer commuting with cars, although there is some truth in that. The main reason is that sidewalks are design flaws. Modern sidewalks intuitively are uninviting for use. You notice this yourself. When was the last time you wanted to use the sidewalk to go anywhere? And even if you did, how comfortable did you feel? Now, how come when you walk in a park or in large cities with small and tight streets, that awkwardness feeling goes away? It's still the same pavement, so what changed? You see, when considering spaces for design, most people understand that things have and can take up physical space, but they fail to consider its space of influence. I'll give you an example. Here's you and me. Now, if I were to ask you, how much space do you take up? You might say this much. Okay, but what if you stretch out your arms like this? Suddenly your zone increases. Now this isn't your scientific volume, but rather the zone that you can influence, which is much larger than your physical space. But we also have voices, and when we shout, our zone of influence increases again. Understanding this zone of influence is key to knowing why you feel uncomfortable at these sorts of sidewalks. Mainly due to three factors: the noise level of the road, and subconsciously feeling unsafe because although you aren't on the road itself, you are still close enough where you can still be struck by accidents. Not to mention the feeling of being stared at by cars passing by. So roads have large zones of influence. The larger the road, the larger the zone. And it just so happens that we have delegated pedestrian walkways to be right next to the road. So how does all this relate to the now? You see, because the pedestrian was an afterthought, it was never truly considered that this weird creation would really be an issue. But over 100 years later, it definitely has. It may seem like a weird complaint. People, if they ever complain, usually do so about the road itself, not the little piece of pavement next to it. But that little sliver of cement is important because that is, in a sense, all the usable public space that is technically left. So the only option that is left is to create separate spaces like parks for people to have as their own. But it doesn't solve the underlying problem. You can't expect people to use a space just because it's labeled as usable space. In the same way, you can't expect a band-aid to fix a flesh wound. You can create sidewalks wherever you want, but you haven't fixed the issue at hand. And having parks is not the solution either. Most people don't have the time to commute just so they can experience community. They want to experience community in their commute. In order to do that, you have to make the spaces something that people feel naturally pulled to use. People instinctively avoid places that feel off-putting, and in order to invite them, you have to make them feel safer. Unfortunately, the solutions to this are limited, and in practice, the only thing that can truly work is to take more space away from roadways and increase the pedestrian places, which, in a world ever growing on its dependence on cars, seems unlikely. However, this is a problem modern city developers have noted and have begun to tackle. Perhaps better city design that prioritizes these issues could revolutionize these spaces and bring back the human travel once again.